Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode number 343 of the Tick Boot Camp podcast. The title of today's interview is Shining Through Lyme. My name is Emma Pakulis.
And I'm Matt Sabatello, and I'm so happy to have Emma back as my co-host for the second time to interview the brilliant Rebecca.
Matt, this was a really exciting interview. Without further ado, let's get to Rebecca. Hey, Rebecca, welcome to Tick Boot Camp. First, tell me a little bit about your childhood. Were you from San Diego originally?
No, so I actually was born and raised until I was 20 in upstate New York. I was from Albany, Saratoga County area, and overall, my childhood was pretty uneventful. I was just a normal kid. I did start during the age of 9 to have a lot of issues, and later we would figure out, it was all related to Lyme. But my childhood was normal. I was a very artistic kid, very intelligent. From what my teachers have said, it was like normal suburban life.
Okay. So you said at 9 was when you saw the tick bite, your first one. I read.
Yeah, so I was playing at a park, and I had never even heard of what ticks were, but at this specific park we used to play at, there were signs posted of pictures of ticks, and it said Lyme disease, and it had a picture of a bullseye rash, and like a park for kids. And so as we were getting into the car, my mom noticed that on the back of my neck, I had a tick embedded in me. And so immediately we drove to the nearest Walmart. They went to get some tweezers, and I remember sitting in the car like crying because I have this bug like in the back of my neck.
Of course.
And so I'm like sitting there waiting for them. Then they come out, and then they just yank it, which now I know is not the greatest way to remove a tick, but
I'm cringing, Rebecca.
I know. So that's what they did at the time. And after that, I started having some issues, but it was very not until years later, it's 5 years later, where I had issues, but I started getting migraines here and there. I started fainting here and there, but it wasn't so bad,
So you never fainted until after your tick bite?
No.
Okay. Okay. And all of those symptoms developed over years?
Yeah, over a few years. When I turned 14, I was in middle school, and I think maybe puberty. There's a couple factors that I think played into it. I think puberty. I think getting my wisdom teeth extracted. I got mono, Epstein-Barr. So all those things, I think in combination, really brought the infection out of whatever was going on. And then I also had gone to a fall retreat with my religious organization at the time, and it was up in the Adirondacks and all those ticks, and I think that I probably got bit again as well.
Okay, so what were you doing at the time when your symptoms were subtle enough and passable that you were still active in regular life? You were social, you were a runner?
Yeah. So I was very into school. I wasn't so social, but I play with the neighbors. I did have friends, and I was doing all these activities. Art and running was my biggest hobby at the time. I was super into fitness for 12 years old. Okay, as much as a 12-year-old can be into fitness, I was running 25 miles a week. I had an at-home gym, so I was lifting weights, little 12-year-old me, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And it was the best. And I did horseback riding. I was pretty active for the most part. Yeah.
Rebecca, I'm gonna just chime in here because I have so many thoughts running through my head already from just the first couple of minutes of you and Emma talking. So when you were bit at 9, you said you were at a park and there were signs. Can you just tell us exactly, what part of the country and what part of the state were you in where you were seeing these signs? Because a lot of states don't even recognize, chronic Lyme or take Lyme seriously. So I'm very impressed that they had signs, frankly.
Yep. Albany County in New York. So upstate, there tends to be a lot of signs specifically around the Albany area. where it has like a warning sign saying with a tick, picture of a tick, a picture of a bullseye, and it says like warning, Lyme disease or tick infections, and it doesn't really say what to do. It just says warning.
And then you were in the mountains and probably got bit and reinfected, and nobody, when you went to the mountains, talked about tick prevention, using some sort of tick spray, what to do tick checks. There was no talk of that. No discussion about being in a high risk environment in New York State.
No, nope, not at all.
So you get bit when you're 9, you're reinfected when you go to the Adirondacks, then you have a dental procedure, you have your wisdom teeth removed. And we know dental procedures are big triggers for Lyme patients because it releases all of this bacteria into your bloodstream, and it's a huge burden on your immune system. And for me, I experienced my first symptom right after a dental procedure. So that's really common in the Lyme community. And then you had mono, right? Epstein-Barr virus, which is another opportunistic pathogen that's a trigger. So here you are, your poor little body from 9 to 14 is just getting beat up. You got 2 tick bites, probably, maybe more. You're getting an opportunistic virus with Epstein-Barr virus and mono. You're getting your teeth, your wisdom teeth done and having all this bacteria flooding into your bloodstream. And at 14, you can't take it anymore. But before we get to 14, to Emma's point, I mean, did you even know what Lyme was, how serious it was? Did your parents ever talk to you about it? And was it something that was taught to you as a child about the risks of tick bites, Lyme disease, and how to take proper precautions out when you're out in nature?
No. In fact, I used to make fun of it. I would say like Lyme as in like Lyme. I was like, oh, Lyme disease, because my grandmother's dog had it or something like that. And I don't know, it was like a play on words, I was young. I was like, oh, Lyme disease, that's so funny. Like, and my grandmother was like, no, it's really bad for the dogs. It hurts them and they're in a lot of pain. I'm like, oh no. So I only knew about Lyme disease in dogs, and I knew that it came from a tick. And my grandmother was very cautious of ticks because she really lives like in the forest and she's with animals all the time. So I knew that she did spray like permethrin on her clothes and things like that when she went outside, but nothing really besides that.
Now the other, I'm going to shut up again, and Emma's going to pick up after this question, I promise. But I have so many thoughts because you're just giving us so much information here. You also mentioned that you were a runner and you love to work out, right? And again, there's a commonality there because I was an avid runner. I mean, I was running 10 miles a day, and it was an outlet for me. It was a stress reliever. I love the endorphins. I love the high that it gave me. But we've learned from a lot of the doctors on this podcast that over-exercising is a real thing. And when your body's fighting off things like Lyme disease and Epstein-Barr virus and pathogens from dental procedures, if you're over-exercising, you're further burdening your body. You're actually weakening your body rather than strengthening your body. So looking back, do you think that was happening with you, that you loved exercise and maybe you were over-exercising and that was contributing to your immune dysfunction and led to your crash at 14?
That may be a strong possibility. Because it was the same year when I joined the track team that I was really like, our coaches were pushing us. I was going hard at it and I was loving it. But you're right, my body eventually, I just I couldn't take it anymore. Started passing out on my runs.
In the middle of them?
Yeah.
Oh.
And then my parents wouldn't know where I was and they'd have to come look for me in their car.
Rebecca, our stories are oddly in line. My earliest symptoms was fainting, and nobody could tell me why. And it was exercise-induced fainting. I'd be running at the track down the block, and I would just faint. And I'd eventually come back. And then it got to the point where I would just be like, if I just wait, I'll eventually come back to it, because I couldn't figure out why. And this went on for like a year, and then my symptoms progressed. But I finally found somebody who started with their early symptoms being fainting from running. I don't think I've ever heard anybody tell me, hey, I'd run and I'd faint, because that was me as well. So thank you for sharing that. You just validated my experience.
You guys.
Anyway, I'm sorry, Emma. I'm talking way too much. This is you.
No, that's so huge. I'm glad you found each other. I'm sorry for you both. That sounds awful. But so when you started passing out when you were running, was that maybe like when the warning signs started that something seriously wrong, or no?
Yeah, definitely. That was scary. I mean, I never fainted in my life. And the theories at the time was that it was puberty, and that's why I was being affected, and I couldn't handle it, and I wasn't drinking enough water, all those classic,
Dehydrated.
yeah, those classic things.
Is this, so the people that are telling you you're dehydrated, etc., is that your primary care doctor? Like, did you see someone when you started passing out when you were?
No, it was mainly, my family, and granted, they didn't know what was going on either. Nobody knew. So I think they're just trying to, like, what's the logical reason why somebody might be passing out,
Mhm.
So they did their best, but it wasn't until I got worse that they really took me to the doctor, and they're like, figure this out.
When you finally did see someone, what were your severe symptoms that made you go?
In the beginning, it was like my muscles, they were hurting so much, and my joints were killing me. And again, some of it was blamed on the running. Okay, well, then I stopped running because I got too weak. I was very weak. It was to the point where I was having trouble standing. I was dizzy, and I couldn't stand either. And I was starting getting really confused. And then my speech would slur. And besides that, it was just mainly the fatigue. I was so tired. I was falling asleep in class. Okay, that wasn't like me. I had no energy to do anything. I would go home, I would fall asleep, and then I barely could wake up for school because I had to wake up at like 5 o'clock, and I stopped going to school at that point. I told my mom, I'm not going to school anymore. I can't do this.
Okay, so who did she take you to?
So first I saw my primary care doctor, and at the time they didn't think, they said again, it's puberty. They didn't really think anything was wrong. Okay. And then my big event after that, it happened before I could really see more doctors. I ended up in the ER because my left side of my body, just my left side, was paralyzed. I couldn't move my arm, my leg, my spleen was enlarged. And I was super confused. I was hyperventilating. I had tachycardia. And at the time, they were just shoving Ativan at me and trying to get me to calm down, saying, your daughter's having a panic attack. We don't really know what's wrong with her. This is not something, like, there's nothing wrong with her. There's no reason why her body would be paralyzed. This wonderful experience. First time I was really gaslighted.
Literally.
This is
Yeah.
awful.
This is
little me. And so my mom goes on Facebook and rants about it. And she's like, I can't believe this happened with my daughter at the hospital. And so it just so happened that a woman that she knew was a doctor. She was a pediatrician. And she said, this sounds like Lyme disease. Bring her to see me. And she's like, okay. So that's what we did.
Before you saw her, you were hospitalized 2 more times or 1 more time?
I was hospitalized so many times.
Oh, okay, so many.
Over the course of like everything. But by the time I saw her, I was in really bad shape.
How long was your left side paralyzed for? What made it unparalyzed?
It was I think it started in the morning, and then it was just the whole day. I couldn't move. I remember my parents telling me, would you get up? Like, why are you on the ground? Get up, get up. I said, I can't move. I don't know. And then I was panicking, and they called an ambulance. I went in the ambulance. I don't remember when it just was not paralyzed. I must have went to sleep, and I must have woken up the next day decent, but that wasn't the only time my body had like paralysis like that.
Rebecca, did your mom and dad think that it was just anxiety? Because the ER doctors kept telling you and your family, you're fine. It's anxiety. It's puberty. There's nothing wrong with your daughter. So obviously you were so young, you're 14 at this time, but did your parents believe it? I mean, it's such a, you want to believe the doctors. They're the people trained to tell you what's wrong, but it sounds like your mom didn't, and she went to Facebook, right? Which is awesome. But I'm just curious, was there doubt there? Do you know what was going through their heads? Obviously you're young, but I'm curious if you ever had this chat with your mom, if she really thought you were just anxious,
No, she believed me. Both my parents believed me, and they knew that at that point they knew that, okay, it's not anxiety, something's wrong with our daughter. This is not normal for her, that she would be this active and this involved in life, and then suddenly just she's gonna wake up one day and fake everything. No.
When you were in the hospital for the paralysis, they didn't run any sort of Lyme test?
I'm sure that they did drug tests. I'm sure that they did basic tests, but nothing that came back, no.
Did this woman that commented on your mother's Facebook post ultimately become your Lyme specialist?
It started out this way. Yes,
Okay.
for 9 months, she was treating my Lyme disease. Yes, she was really wonderful.
Okay. Did she test you for anything other than Lyme?
Yep. So she was the original person who scheduled, she did the typical Western blot, ELISA, and my ELISA was negative, and then the Western blot was positive, which is like really not normal, especially with and the criteria as well. So that was positive, but then she said, okay, I want you to do the IGeneX test. So that one was not covered by insurance. We did pay out of pocket for most of it. Some of it was reimbursed, but she tested me and I was positive for Babesia and Bartonella and the Lyme.
Do you remember what else she tested you for?
I think she did, that's pretty much it. I mean, I had Epstein-Barr. And then later, years later, I found out that I had Rocky Mountain spotted, Coxsackie virus, and then mycoplasma issues as well.
Okay, so you find this lady, this doctor, and where do you go from here? What's your plan? You start on antibiotics?
Yep. The first thing she puts me on is Septin, orals. So she puts me on Septin, and then she puts me on azithromycin together. And it's just, she also did probiotic, and I think some other supporting supplements as well. Nothing too crazy, just basic like vitamin D or omega, stuff like that. And I didn't see anything improvement. All I saw was that my stomach was just really upset, not happy. I was puking every single day. I couldn't handle it. I'm like, I have all these horse pills that I'm taking, so much medicine every day. And I was just getting worse. I was not getting better. I didn't want to go to school anymore. Over the course of a few months, I just told her I'm not going to school. I'm not doing this. I'm way too sick. And I just continued to have a spiral until eventually the doctor says, okay, I think you need somebody who can give you something that I can't do. And then she was also at the time, this was back in 2011, 2012. So they were going after doctors in New York State who treated Lyme disease. And they took her license away from her because she was treating Lyme patients. So she got it back eventually. Everybody held like a giant fundraiser for her. I believe there's legislation in place now that they can't do that, but it was brutal. It was so horrible and I felt so guilty. But she really did the best that she could. She was an amazing doctor.
Did you just do Septin and Azithro with her, or did you change up your antibiotics with her, or no?
At that time, no, I did not change up the antibiotics at all. It was just those two.
Steadily for 9 months.
Yeah.
But so interesting, not interesting, it's really sad, but the fact that your doctor was treating people with Lyme disease and helping them get their health back, and then she lost her license, right? And that happened in many, many decades ago, 30 plus years ago, with Dr. Bercca was the first one out on Long Island, and he had to raise over $1 million in legal fees from his patients to just keep his license with a slap on the wrist. And he eventually stopped treating medicine because he just didn't want to deal with that risk anymore. So it's interesting when people say, oh, well, New York has so many cases of Lyme disease, there must be a ton of Lyme-related doctors. And I'll tell you, on Long Island, there aren't that many. Some are popping back up in New York City, but I believe that's because doctors don't want to help Lyme patients because they know they spent a ton of money getting their MD, right, their medical degree. and they have a risk of losing their license and being blacklisted in the community. So we don't have doctors that can truly help us because of all the politics behind it. And that's really sad. And I feel like you got caught up in the middle of that, Rebecca. So, knowing what was going on, did you ever doubt your diagnosis? Because I can tell you at some points, like when I got diagnosed by my first doctor, and it was in a hospital, and I got lucky enough to have a positive Western blot and ELISA, and then I saw a traditional infectious disease. He gave me 21 days of IV antibiotics, and I still wasn't better. He said, it's not Lyme, it's got to be something else. And I believe that, right? I really just believe that, like there was something else wrong with me, but there wasn't. And that was a significant delay in my healing journey because I believe these doctors. So when your doctor was being attacked for treating Lyme patients improperly because chronic Lyme isn't real, right? The whole justification behind taking these licenses away was because chronic Lyme isn't real. Lyme is cured after a short course of antibiotics. That was the rationale behind all these doctors losing their licenses. Did you start to doubt your diagnosis because you weren't feeling better? Like, where was your head at this point?
Well, I never doubted my diagnosis at all. I never doubted the validity, what I was feeling. However, there was instances where she said, okay, I really can't handle this. I got to send you to a specialist just in case. I need to make sure your heart's okay, cardiologist. I need to make sure your brain is okay, neurologist. So I had to go to these specialties. And during that time when I went to these specialists, brutal. They were horrible. And I was a young kid, a teenager. And they made me doubt myself. I had a neurologist at that time. I was getting closer to the point where I needed better, like just more intense care. I was in a wheelchair at this point, and I had a neurologist burp in my face when he was giving me his the neurological exam. I had a cardiologist tell me that I was just anxious and I needed medication. And
this was after your Lyme diagnosis, correct? This is after you had a positive Western blot Lyme disease test. With your history of a tick bite on your neck, being in the Adirondacks, and all these other things that are clearly indicative of you suffering from late-stage Lyme disease, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I mean, so you had you had all these doctors telling you it's not Lyme disease, but yet you still knew, which I think is awesome because I doubted myself. So I mean, that's a testament to your strength, Rebecca, of how confident and strong you were at just 14 years old, and how strong your family was as a support system to get you the care that you need. So to Emma's point, if you can go on and tell us, so you're pivoting after 9 months of these oral antibiotics and supplements and things and probiotics. You get referred out. So who's your next doctor, and what's your next course of action now that the orals failed?
Right. So I went to see, and he's actually been on your podcast before. His name is Dr. Daniel Cameron.
Oh, we love Dr. Cameron.
Yeah, Dr. Cameron. And so we went and saw him. It was a 2.5 hour drive. We were like, let's get the heck out of Albany, Saratoga. Nobody can help us up here. Let's go down to Westchester. So we took the drive and we went to see him. There was quite a sense of urgency as far as at that point, they had a wait list, like most Lyme physicians at that time. And they're like, okay, we can get you in like ASAP. Like, when can you come down? And we went into his office. I saw him, and he really is like a fantastic doctor.
Okay. What was the course of action that you begun?
So he pretty much looked over what my previous doctor had did, assessed all my symptoms. At that point, I was so bad. I wheeled in my wheelchair. I had lawnmower earmuffs on because I did not want to hear anything. And they turned off the lights for me in the back as well, because I just laid down on the table, and then he came in, knock, and he said, all right. And he talked to me, did really like a thorough assessment. And he said, I think we should do IV antibiotics. And then he told us, come back in a week. We're going to get you started. We're going to put your PICC line in, the catheter for the IV antibiotics, and we're going to start treatments.
What were your symptoms at that time?
At that point, I was losing my hearing. my vision. I was blacking out. I was fainting, dizzy, nauseous, vomiting. Really, psychologically, that is when I really started to, it became scary. I was having full-on neurological psychiatric symptoms. I had ended up in the psychiatric hospital at that point, right before I saw him. Not doing good. I was having hallucinations, hearing things, seeing things, severely depressed, trying to off myself, if you will. So he was like, all right, we gotta get this taken care of.
Rebecca, can I just jump in here, because I think, first of all, thank you for being so brave and sharing that you are having these severe psychological symptoms, because so many people are insecure about that, myself included, right? At some point, where I don't want to admit that I had these psychological symptoms from Lyme disease, because somehow it makes it less legitimate because of how controversial the disease is. So I just want to take a point to tell everybody listening that psychological symptoms with Lyme disease are very common. And hallucinations are very common. I had them. The one hallucination, the first one I ever had, and it's very detailed, but I'm going to share, I was holding a dead rat with a whole bunch of alive rats running around me, and I'll never forget it. It scared the crap out of me, right? So Allie Hilfiger, in her book, and we had her on the podcast, she shares, she ended up in a mental health institute as well, because she had all of these psychological symptoms, which that ultimately led to her diagnosis of Lyme disease. But these are very common things to occur hand in hand, where the neurological, effects of Lyme disease cause psychosis, they cause hallucinations, they cause depression, they cause anxiety. So I feel like at this point, even more so, doctors are saying to you, hey, it can't be Lyme disease, right? Is that what you're getting even more pressure from? Because now you're ending up in a mental health facility. Are they just saying, hey, look, you're crazy. It's not Lyme anymore. You treated Lyme. You had antibiotics for 9 months. I feel like that's probably where you were at, but yet your family still took you to see Dr. Cameron because they were so locked in on the truth, which is it's still related to a tick-borne illness, right? Which is awesome. So can you just kind of tell us about what was going on with your external influences, with your mental health issues, and how your parents and you stood so strong in spite of all that?
Right. When I started to show symptoms of anxiety and depression, they brought me to a psychiatrist immediately. And I had, thank goodness, I had the most amazing experience because my psychiatrist himself actually had Lyme disease. However, about 2 months into him helping me with everything, he just disappeared. We never heard from him again. We don't know what happened to him. I still to this day don't know what happened to him. Hope he's okay. But that from there, I was still getting psychiatric help. Thank goodness all of my doctors believed me. However, every time without fail, I went into a hospital, whether it was psychiatric or non-psychiatric, they just made me out to be like I was crazy. So my first time I was put in the psychiatric hospital, they were just baffled. What is wrong with this girl? They actually thought my parents were like, they were going to call CPS on my parents. They thought I was like, they're being neglected. And so they put me up from the psychiatric center to the neurological institute. They did an EEG, or like the thing with your brain.
EEG, yep.
EEG, correct. So the EEG, they did it, and everything was like normal because I don't have epilepsy. So the doctor looks at me and he gets up really close to my face and he slides over and says, are you not getting enough attention at school? It's like, what? I don't even go to school.
How did your mom not slap him at that point? I'm shocked your mom didn't just full off hit him at that point.
My dad was so agitated. He immediately said, get my daughter out of here. I'm taking my daughter out. We're checking her out. I do not want her in here anymore. He was so arrogant, that man. Like, that one really sticks out to me. So they thought I was.
Of course it sticks out to you.
Off my mind.
Oh my God. Every serious medical institution gaslit you along the way.
Yeah, but I knew what I was feeling, and I knew that, like, no, I may have some issues now because I'm sick, but I know that at that age, I'm shocked that I knew, oh, these big adults they don't know what they're talking about. was wild.
Well, kudos on your perseverance and your authenticity to yourself and knowing and standing up for yourself.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. Okay. Back to Dr. Cameron. Did he retest you? Is he who found the Rocky Mountain?
Right. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Did he begin treating you before testing you or while waiting for results because you were so sick?
Yeah. He began treating me with what he had right there and then. He started, and his approach was very interesting. And I noticed he would rotate like every few weeks. I stayed on the IV antibiotics, but he
Okay.
would use oral antibiotics and interchange them because he was trying to target the like he would use things like Tindamax and Flagyl and Mepron to target like the Babesia Bartonella component while using the antibiotics more particular for the Lyme, like the IV. So he would switch things in and out every few weeks. It would change them up. And that was an interesting concept to me, but I really, it's what got me better.
So what were your IV antibiotics? What other antibiotics did you take with him, if you remember? And
Right.
also, how long were you on each antibiotic for before he would switch one out? Like, was that consistent where he would like do like cyclical periods, or if you weren't responding to one, he would stop it?
Right. So I was constantly, the entire duration that I had my PICC line, I was on IV Rocephin, so Ceftin, the IV form,
Okay.
and then oral wise, I was never on any other types of IV. I was only on Ceftin, and then for orals, it would be switched out every 2 weeks. That is when I would see him. Generally every 2 weeks, sometimes a month. It depends. He looked at my symptoms. It was kind of saying, okay, do we want to get her to have a Herxheimer reaction? How are you doing? What's too much for your body? Are we not doing enough? Because every time I would go in every 2 weeks, I had to fill out the symptom chart to kind of see what's going on. And I was on supplements as well to support my body at the same time, doing different detox methods as well. But IV and the antibiotics, antivirals, antiparasitic were the main part of my treatment.
Rebecca, I'm just going to jump in. So you said IV antibiotics, obviously there was Rocephin, but then you said antivirals as well. Were there other IVs you were getting pushed beyond the Rocephin antibiotics from an antiviral and antiparasitic standpoint, or is it just no? So it's really more oral on that side, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it was the IV Rocephin and the orals. And then you said that you were doing things for detox as well and supplements, right? So I just feel like it's a really important part that I wish I had. When I got first diagnosed and I had the IV antibiotics, I did nothing. I didn't even know what detox was. I didn't even know what the word meant, right? So I was just so toxic. I just kept getting sicker and sicker and sicker. So talk to us about what you do with Dr. Cameron to help detox, to aid in, your drainage system and purging all the die off of these toxins so you weren't getting so much sicker from the aggressive IV antibiotics.
Right. Yeah, it's so difficult because he would always say to me, you're gonna get worse before you get better. You're gonna have these reactions, these Herxheimer reactions, and your body is really not gonna be happy. So one thing he really, really stressed to me, at the time I was too young to drink, so alcohol wasn't even a part of that, but he said, no sugar. And it killed me because I loved sugar so much. He said, don't do it. And then I told him, well, I started eating sugar-free stuff. And he said, no, that's worse for you. So I was banned from sugar. I tried gluten-free, didn't really do anything for me.
Rebecca, I'm just going to interrupt real quick. I'm sorry again, but with the sugar, was it just processed sugar, or did you have to cut out natural sugar as well, like fruits and things that were high in sugar that were natural?
Yeah, you're correct. Processed. Yeah.
Okay. Because for me, I was the same way. I mean, I was eating sugar when I shouldn't have, and I have zero reactions and had zero reactions to natural sugar with, I would make a high sugar fruit smoothie and I would feel amazing. I'd have fake sugar and I'd feel like complete crap. Right. So I think for me, that was my personal experience, but I apologize for interrupting. So you said you tried to go gluten-free, you couldn't do it. Right. So that was the second thing you talked about.
Yeah. Oh, I agree also with the smoothies. That's how I was literally able to not starve, because that was the only thing I could stomach was smoothie with protein powder put in it to get my medicine in. But detoxing wise, there wasn't so much information back then on the internet in 2011, 2012. Like, it really wasn't what there is today at all. There was a few YouTube videos by a girl I became close with over the years, and she would make detox videos saying how important lemon water was, and how dry brushing, like taking a little brush and then putting yourself in a really hot bath. People did infrared saunas. I didn't have access to one, and I never did saunas, but those are some things that she also recommended. So I would find videos here and there about what to do. Mainly rest, really rest, hydrate, sleep. And again, there wasn't, like, people did coffee enemas too. That's not something at my age I was interested in. So there was very limited options at the time for detoxing. So mainly lemon water, basic self-care, babying myself, which was very easy because I was a teenager. I didn't have any responsibilities. I was exempt from school at that point. I didn't have to work a full-time job. I didn't have bills to pay. I feel now that I'm older, I feel terrible for people who in adulthood get Lyme, because I don't know how people function. I don't.
But you said that lymphatic massages and dry brushing were very helpful as well, which I think is really powerful to help get all the die off and all the toxins in your lymphatic system, assisting it to be flushed out of your system. And are you comfortable sharing the name of the person you found on YouTube, her YouTube channel? Because I'm hoping her channel's still out there. Maybe people that are listening can go look her up and find some of her videos.
Her name was Lyme Chick, and her name is Macy. So yeah, but she had those videos at the time, and I'm like, wow, this is the best thing ever. I don't know what to do. I didn't know a girl my age who had Lyme disease.
It's interesting because we interviewed Cassidy Colbert, who's about your age, and she said the same thing. She was, time-wise in parallel with yours, and she goes, back then there just wasn't as much information, and it was very hard to find people out on the internet back then that can relate. So she started a Facebook group which had like almost nobody in it back then, and now it's just blown up over the years, of course. Right now she still maintains it as a moderator, and it's just become the self-sustaining group that she's created from well over a decade ago. But talk to us more, Rebecca, about I guess the first question I have is, how long in total were you on the IV antibiotics for, with the rotating orals every 2 weeks, with the supplements you were on, and give us an idea over the course of that time how you were getting better or not getting better.
Right. So IV antibiotics overall was about a year and a half, just with the IV. And then once I was able to graduate from that, I was still on oral antibiotics. And then eventually, once all my symptoms were gone, I'd say after 2 years, I stopped. And
you were symptom free after 2 years. So a year and a half of IV, 2 years of orals, and you were symptom free.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So Dr. Cameron, our man, I love Dr. Cameron. He comes in clutch when you're getting sicker and sicker and sicker with your previous doctor. And here you are within 2 years and you're symptom free. And you literally were wheeled into his office in a wheelchair with earmuffs on, because you couldn't take, with the lights off, because you couldn't take any light or sound, and you couldn't even walk yourself into the doctor's office, right? I mean, that's a powerful transformation. I mean, walk us through, I just want to hear, give us an idea of how sick you were at your worst. You mentioned, and there's no such thing as too much information. We want to be as honest as possible and truthful as possible, and as transparent as possible, but we don't want to trigger people of course. But like you said, you were contemplating taking your life. You couldn't function, and then 2 years later you healed. I want to hear an idea of where you were at your worst. Give us describe a scene of at your worst, and then describe a scene of where you were at the end of the 2 years and how you had your life back. I just want to hear that radical transformation, if you can share that with us.
Sure, of course. The worst I was definitely had to be psychiatric wise. That was the peak of, oh my gosh, my life is a mess. I was in a wheelchair. I was not at school. I had lost all of my friends. My religious organization that I was a part of, forget about it. They did not care. My certain parts of my family were freaked out. They stopped being in contact with me and my parents. I would sit and lay in my bed and stare at the ceiling for like hours and hours and hours a day. And I was probably sleeping for 20 something hours a day. I don't even know how I slept that much. I have no idea how. And I had none of my friends would visit me. And so I remember I had a little iPod Touch, and I would see my friends all on Facebook, and I'm like, wow, this is terrible. This really sucks. So I would cry every single day. And then I just wanted to die. Every day I wanted to die. And I was just so sick of my life, crying all the time. And really, like, that was my worst mentally. I was like, I can't deal with this anymore. And switching over to my best, 2 years later, I decided that all my fake friends that I had at school, I'm like, I don't want to be at school anymore. So I was able to finish my junior year of high school. And at the end of the year, I put in a request to drop out. Like, I'm like, I don't even want to go to my senior year. These people, it's a waste. It's not going to be good for me. My school was mainly about sports. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, I need to be able to take care of my health. Gosh forbid anything happens. Well, I ended up overdoing it, but I went to college the next year for my senior year of high school would have been. I went to college full time. I was working full time between 40 to 60 hours a week, which
Wow.
overdoing it. And I had an apartment. I had got my first pet. I was still active in the Lyme community that I was on in Instagram. So like being a very strong advocate, really just dive deep into my hobbies. I was in a relationship at the time. I was like killing it. I was doing great.
So you were back to your pre-Lyme state of over-exercising, overworking, overdoing everything to your go, busy life, right?
Yeah, we have a pattern here in my life.
But Rebecca, so obviously, I mean, that was a great contrast that you just described. But I just want to touch back. I'm going to back up a little bit. You mentioned that your I think it was your church group and some of your extended family treated you differently. Was it because they didn't think you were sick? Is it because they doubted you and your parents that it was actually Lyme disease? What was the tension there? Because if you had cancer, I can't imagine them treating you the way you described they treated you. So I think there's got to be some sort of like either A, they didn't believe you, or B, they just simply didn't understand, right?
Oh, Matt, you just brought back so many memories. If you had cancer, I used to say that at the ripe age of 14 all the time. You know, if I had cancer, my friends would talk to me. I can't believe it. They didn't understand it. They thought I was faking it. They didn't realize what Lyme disease was. I lost my best friend and my boyfriend at the time. Like, I was young, who cares? But they got in cahoots with each other. They left me. They're like, goodbye. All my friends are like, goodbye. I remember one time I wheeled myself in to church and the pastor saw me and turned right around. He went the other way, completely avoided me. They tried to stage an intervention with my father.
The church tried to stage an intervention?
Yeah, they were trying to stage an intervention with him. He never told me this until years later. And he said that he just didn't like going, and they were just so nasty because they didn't understand Lyme disease. They thought her daughter is causing problems in our church because too much attention's on her and she's creating problems with our kids. And I'm like, no, actually, your kids just don't have empathy and you guys are targeting my family. But okay.
Your church could have collectively decided to pray for you and your family in these moments.
No.
I am so sorry that you've had to go through that. I mean, that's just horrible. And to Emma's point, I mean, there is a section of this Lyme community that is, you know, that are strong believers in Christ, and they have prayer groups where when they have rough moments, they'll text each other and then they pray for each other, and it really has helped them get through the hardest of their moments. And when you needed that, you were abandoned, and I'm simply just so sorry for that, to hear that your church of all groups abandoned you. Exactly. Is just awful. Yeah. But thank God you had a supportive mom and dad who were not influenced by the doctors, these people at church, and they kept fighting for you to get you the proper treatment. Because I mean, any other family, most other families wouldn't have had the strength and the courage and the persistence that your family had, you know, including yourself, Rebecca, you and your parents, to keep pushing along and know that something was wrong. So
Yeah.
that is awful. I mean, since, I'm just curious, have any of these people resurfaced in your life since then and apologized, or, you know, realized that maybe they were treating you wrong, you know, in a wrong manner, whether it be the church or whether it be socially, any of your friends from when you were younger?
You wish, right? But no. No, none of them ever. Nobody. And there was so many people that acted this way, and I never got an apology. In fact, it was worse, because years later, after I didn't even know these people anymore, they would comment on my Instagram, because I was like very active in a Lyme disease community back in 2012 to however long still today. And I saw, like, I made a post about PTSD, and my ex-boyfriend literally didn't follow me, nothing. We had each other blocked. And somehow he was able to get maybe another comment saying, "Oh, I did research about PTSD, and only war veterans get PTSD." And I'm like, for real? You crazy?
Yeah, the trolls on social media, never mind when they're just random internet trolls, but when it's an ex-boyfriend like that, it's just awful. I mean, the problem that I see as an outsider looking in, first of all, I'm so sorry that you've been treated this way. And again, I'm thankful for your family, and I'm thankful for your strength, but I'm sorry you had to go through this. But I look at this as these things that happen when people speak up and they're vocal and they share their stories and they get attacked. And you get attacked by people that you've known, past romantic partners, you know, the trolls on the internet. Sometimes you get fed up and people just give up. And we've heard, I have friends that I've made in the Lyme community that were great advocates, you know, out there on social media, that have just shut down shop because they can't handle the haters. And that's the part that's so sad, because, you know, I get it. It's triggering. It's hard. It activates our, you know, fight or flight nervous system response. But these haters are really holding us back from getting the word out in the way we could if there weren't so many people. I mean, our good friend Danny Tiger did a post about detox, and it blew up. I think it got she was just telling us last week, got over 3 million views. And the amount of hate she got from it put her into a flare. She was doing well, and now she's like, you know, look, it just, I couldn't believe how mean and hateful some of these comments were from people I just saw it because of the algorithm on Instagram that didn't understand Lyme and just started attacking her about a simple detox video. I mean, it's really, really sad that that's where we are. So again, thank you for not giving up and continuing to advocate. Here we are, we're 10 years later, and you're still a force to be reckoned with. And you're helping us raise awareness and advocate. So I just want to point out again, your strength. And I digress, Emma, I keep jumping in. I apologize. This is such a great story, Rebecca. I mean, sad, but so powerful and inspirational, Rebecca. You are amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
No, definitely. So, okay, so you stopped seeing Dr. Cameron because you were symptom free. You felt so, like, in your own words, you felt great at that time. You were thriving. You were in an apartment. You were working full time. Okay. And did it ever start to hit the fan?
Yeah. So I'd say at the end of the year, at the end of my college year, I didn't even get a chance to finish out a full year. It got too much for me. I couldn't go to my morning classes anymore. I was sleeping all the time, started feeling very yucky and fainting again. And I was like, oh no, I know this feeling. I know this fatigue feeling. And so I went back to Dr. Cameron and I told him all my symptoms. And at the time, he was like, you know, Rebecca, I don't think this is Lyme anymore. He says, I think you're dealing with like things that are post-Lyme that come after this. And I was not prepared for that. I was not prepared for like, hey, my body's gonna get damaged from all this neurological, the way it impacted me. I never thought that I would deal with something after I kicked the infection. And so we didn't know what it was. He made a few suggestions like dysautonomia. I'm like, I don't know what the heck that is. And shortly after that, I was hospitalized like very, I took a fall down the stairs, and it was 20 steps. I ended up in the heart attack stroke unit, and they didn't know what was wrong with me. They thought I was dying. They moved me up into the cardiac unit. I stopped breathing, and then they called a code on me. There was 20 people in the room. It was not good. And then once they had me stable, they said, don't get up, don't go to the bathroom, don't do anything. What did I do? I got up, I went to the bathroom, I fell, I hit my head, I stopped breathing again. My heart was in the mid 200s. Nobody knew what was going on with me. So I posted, of course, on my little Instagram Lyme chat, what the heck is going on with me, guys? I feel like I'm dying. Help. People said, look into POTS, look into dysautonomia. I told my doctors that, and they're like, oh yeah, sure. That was the beginning.
Feed it to them.
Lyme diagnoses, like dysautonomia journey. Yeah.
Did you see Dr. Cameron when you got this POTS disorder, or was that not his specialty anymore?
No, after that, I didn't see him, because I was like, you know what, he's right. It feels like Lyme, but it's not Lyme. But even today, like years and years later, I still wonder. I'm like, do I still have Lyme, and is it not being treated? Am I just, once again, I know why people put Band-Aids on it, because one, either they don't know, or two, it's cheap. It's cheap. Your insurance will cover it. It's cheap to just throw stuff and put Band-Aids on it if your insurance covers it. Really, like if I were today to go start my journey over again as an adult, I would be in severe medical debt.
Rebecca, I just want to, I want to ask you some questions. And, unfortunately, some of these things are going to be just your opinion, right? Because I don't know that we have enough data to answer these questions yet. But I think back, and Dr. Alan McDonald, who we've had on this podcast, another guy from Long Island, New York, he did a study, and he's a pathologist. He does autopsies and studies tissue samples and blood samples. But he did a study on a man who was treated with antibiotics, 10 years straight of various oral antibiotics for Lyme and tick-borne illnesses, and he had IV antibiotics in there as well. And he ended up, after this man passed away, not from Lyme, other causes, they did an autopsy on him, and they found spirochetes riddled in his body, the Lyme bacteria. And oddly enough, they found a very high concentration of spirochetes in his testicles. Why? Who knows, right? So my thought is, once you have late stage Lyme, a lot of leading Lyme doctors are saying you're never going to fully eradicate the microbe, the spirochete, the pathogen, right? It's in your body. It's just kind of at bay because your immune system is managing it. And it's there, just like you have Epstein-Barr virus. The Epstein-Barr virus, you had mono, which gave you the Epstein-Barr virus, and you have it in your body for the rest of your life because it never goes away. And when your body's compromised, it comes out and it can make you sicker, right? So I think that's kind of how Lyme disease is for me, and maybe for you. And debate me if you don't agree, because we don't really know. And this, the whole debate is chronic Lyme an immune response? Is it persistent infection? Is it something else? Now, I believe all the above. I believe chronic Lyme can trigger autoimmunity like it did for me. I believe chronic Lyme persists, that the bacteria persist, Borrelia burgdorferi, plus the other things you get from various co-infections. But what are your thoughts? Because it sounds like you're now of the belief or the mindset that Lyme is out of my body and I'm dealing with damage from it. Or do you believe that the Lyme bacteria was there, but sort of like at bay, and it was kept in a corner because your immune system was so healthy? And then because you were working so aggressively, you're working so many hours, you were a full-time student, you were just living life and overdoing it, that you simply couldn't, your body couldn't manage it anymore, and you crashed. Like, what are your views on that? Give me your thoughts.
Right. I still struggle to really know, which is crazy because I'm so in tune with my body. But a part of me thinks, oh my gosh, like the distinctive feeling of that Lyme fatigue, I know what it feels like. But I know that deep down, like I may not, like the second time around, third time around, I may not have that same fatigue with Lyme. Like, who knows? Like, it's so hard to know, like, what is a result of Lyme? Do I still have the active infection in me? The answer is probably yes. It's probably there. Like you said, my immune system's probably keeping it at bay. But in the meantime, I feel like it's so hard to really just be in constant treatment and to feel like just horrible. You know, when you're actively treating Lyme, really you just break open the door and everything comes out and you feel worse.
Yeah, we've been, Rebecca, developing patterns. So Rich and I are starting another podcast, and we're calling it the Lyme Freedom Formula because, and essentially it's a fancy word of saying we've developed patterns over 350 interviews that have led to success in people from chronic Lyme. And we, again, we're corny because we're corny old guys, right? But we're naming this PARM. So it's, prehabilitation, assist, which is the kill, right? Assist is really getting, helping your body, assisting your immune system in removing the pathogens. Rehab, which is the recovery piece. And then M is the maintenance, right? So like, and we break it out and we can go into it deeper, but I feel like you were very successful in most of those phases. I mean, you were complementing your treatment, so you weren't having too bad of a herx. And you even, but when you got to the rehab, you didn't rehab. You came to symptom relief and you just went full force, guns blazing, and you didn't rehab yourself, and I'm not trying to be critical because I've made mistakes, I've there also, but I'm trying to use our framework that we put together based on success stories on this podcast and apply it to your journey, right? So I feel like the recovery, the rehab phase never really happened for you. So you never made it to the maintenance phase, which allows you to kind of maintain a symptom-free remission state because now you're just maintaining your health with maybe herbal supplements or nervous system regulation techniques, or maybe just, whatever it is, proper sleep, proper diet, and things happen. Of course, you can never live a completely stress-free life. But I just feel like, using that framework, I guess first give me your thoughts on our framework, this prehab, assist, rehab, and then maintenance model, and be honest, because we always say we don't pride ourselves in being right. We want to have good, valid information to help people. So, and we're not going to be offended if you don't like it. And let me know where you think you fit into that. And if maybe you agree that in the rehab and the maintenance phase, you just went too hard once you got better because you wanted so desperately to be normal again.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I really do like that model. I think it's so true that the rehab part is so important. I think a lot of Lymies are guilty of like the skipping the rehab part because you know deep down you got to take care of your body, but you've been down for so long that you want to get back into it and then go a little crazy. And I think that is something I struggle with. And after I got COVID back in July, I started noticing like, oh, I haven't felt like this bad in a long time. So it was the first time in years where I stopped thinking, okay, maybe this is dysautonomia and, oh, maybe my Lyme is back. Like it was my first time where I thought, okay, oh, my Lyme might be back and I need to really look and stop blaming all of these other illnesses and putting bandages on it and really get to the source again. And I'm struggling finding a doctor now where I live.
Yeah. So I'm going to say, so like for me, I feel like you had a really good beginning part of your journey, but then, you to have that balanced sort of approach moving forward. Now you're at a part of your journey where you need somebody to have maybe a more gentle approach, not as aggressive as IV antibiotics, but more of a restorative approach where you can use a variety of, tools. I mean, people have used peptides, people have used, SOT is more of an assist and a kill, but even just immune modulating herbs, it could be herbal tea, it could be, vitamins, it could be, I love nervous system regulation techniques. For me, they've been very powerful because I never found myself getting as worked up nervous system wise before Lyme. And I feel like I'm much more sensitive to that now, to kind of getting in fight or flight and getting defensive and getting upset and getting, so I feel like being able to balance myself out has been very helpful to maintain that level of health. So, I mean, would you agree that now you're looking for somebody to partner with to help you balance and maintain the gains you've made and not go backwards? Like, what are your thoughts? Or do you think you need more kill protocols and you need to go back to the assist phase of our PARM formula?
It was so traumatic for me the first time. And I think that's my worry, is that if I go back to look into it and to try to treat it again, gosh forbid, I'll end up in the same place. And now it's worse because I'm an adult. There's bills to pay. There's people to take care of. There's like, I can't just lay in bed. As an adult, like that type of treatment today for me would be detrimental to my life. And it scares me to like think that I could be in that place psychiatrically again, even though I know it's a low probability that would happen. It terrifies me.
So I want to dig deeper on this, but I don't want to lose context of your story. So from the
Yeah.
time you kind of got sick again to the present date, because now you're 26, right? You were just finishing up college. So some years have transpired there. So did you ever go back to kill treatment? Did you ever go back to IV oral antibiotics? Just can you kind of give us a recap of those couple of years to the present date? Because I do want to talk to you about the fear of going backwards with treatment again, because that really resonates with me and my personal journey as well. But I don't want to lose sight of your whole story, because your whole story is very powerful.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So over the years, I didn't do anything for Lyme. It's quite the opposite. I watched my husband, him do Lyme treatment. We actually met because we had the same doctor, Dr. Cameron. So
No way.
That's so funny. That's so cute.
he was coming up from the city and I was coming down from upstate New York, and we were both meeting at Dr. Cameron's office in the middle in Westchester. And we met online as well. Like we realized, oh, we follow each other on Instagram in the Lyme group.
Did you physically meet at his office, or you knew each other online beforehand?
Yeah, and then I made Dr. Cameron like a little frame, and he goes, oh, I always wondered who made him that frame, like who made him that picture.
Wow, what a awesome love story, right? I mean, that's wonderful. I mean, so
Yeah.
That's a whole nother topic there. So you've really been helping your husband, and we're going to get to that in a second. I think that I would love to hear you and Emma talk about the romantic piece, because that's so hard in itself, finding romance when you're sick, right, with Lyme disease. But if we could just quickly talk about the fear piece, because it sounds like you kind of just sort of did little things here and there and just kind of had some ups and downs and bumps in the road. And now you kind of figured out, well, should I do more? Can I do more? And you're no longer symptom free, but you're kind of managing your symptoms, it sounds like, right now. Is that an accurate assessment of where you're at today?
Yeah, I'm not symptom free, but I can't tell what's going on.
Okay.
I don't know what's what anymore. I'm assuming though, like knowing my body, I'm thinking, okay, this is probably Lyme again. So I'm in the managing, but not really managing, kind of putting band-aids on the symptoms.
Right. So I'm actually going to throw this question at Emma, because I think this is a good question for you guys to pick up. And then I would love for you to talk about the romantic piece of it, because I love hearing success stories in the Lyme community like that romantically. But Emma, what are your thoughts on the fear piece? Because personally, I was paralyzed in fear. I regained 30% of my health. I stayed there for years when doctors were gaslighting me and telling me it wasn't Lyme and I just have to deal with it. And I have fibromyalgia and I have lupus and I have all this stuff going on. And I finally had the courage, thanks to Tick Bootcamp and this podcast and people like Rebecca and you, Emma, to take steps, and my health improved significantly. And I mean, it's a complete game changer for me health-wise, because I finally had, I was able to get past that fear. So what are your thoughts on what are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you think that's a dangerous approach? And what kind of advice would you give Rebecca in that regard? Because I think we can all relate to that fear component of, I've made so much progress, I do not want to go back to where I was, because it's a valid fear, right? I mean, what are your thoughts, Emma, on that?
More than a valid fear. Just talking about it, my heart's palpitating, and I'm remembering all my horror nights and why I didn't want to start treatment again when I found out I had Bartonella after I thought doing my treatments. But I felt like my fear taught me the first time, after really sitting with it, that I don't have to do this hard and fast approach, that I can treat my Lyme at my own rate. If I don't like what my doctor's saying, I can choose to say like, well, isn't that kind of funky? And I don't want to go that fast, or I'm hurting a lot. Maybe we can cut back, or this pill isn't doing anything for me. When I really took control, it eased my own fear. That's what I would.
Rebecca, what are your thoughts for the future? It sounds like you're thinking the Lyme is back. Obviously the hardcore IV antibiotic route might be too much for you now, because you have, responsibilities you didn't have when you were a child. Do you think you're going to look at maybe some more gentler approaches? And again, I'm hoping this isn't triggering you. You seem very emotionally strong. So, I do want to ask, like, what are your plans for the future? Because I believe, Rebecca, in fact, I know you can feel better than you are today. I mean, look, you're obviously doing well, but I know you can get back to symptom free. And so I want to challenge you to think about that and think about what your next steps could be to help you get to a symptom free state where you're really loving life. And not that you're not loving life, but you can really love life even more, Rebecca.
Yeah. First step is finding a Lyme literate doctor where I am now. We had one in San Diego where we lived, had one in New York. Now that we're in South Florida, it's not that I don't want to commute. I'm willing to commute. I get nervous. I get nervous because since 10 years now, since then, there has been so many different ways that people have started to treat Lyme. So many different opinions, so many different stories. And I'm like, it's not the same Lyme community that I started out with. And a lot of it freaks me out. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And so I don't know what to trust, what not to trust, where to put my finances, where to put my time, my energy. So it's going to take a lot for me. It's going to take a lot of researching. It's going to take a lot of maybe diving back in and asking for questions, like help and advice, but at the same time, taking everything with a grain of salt and making those decisions. Because when I was a child, I wasn't making decisions. Like I didn't get a choice of my decisions. I was just led by my parents to do what they felt was best, which ultimately was. But now that I'm an adult, like Emma said, I'm responsible for like the decisions that you make.
But also, when you are so sick, you'll take anything. Like you'll do anything, especially someone like a doctor that knows what they're finally talking about. You will do anything. So it's all like, yeah, it's all.
Yeah, Emma, and I just want to say for Rebecca, obviously Emma, Rich, and I are here for you offline, personally, to guide you in any way we can based on our experiences. Our community's here for you. Everybody listening to this podcast, I'm sure to be happy to chat with you. And, look, this is something I look at this as a lifelong journey where I'm a different person today because of my experience. And I'm constantly looking for ways to improve my health, no matter what, even no matter where I'm at in my journey, I'm always going to be looking for hacks and ways to optimize my health. And now, Rebecca, you're just at a state where you're looking to find a practitioner to partner with to give you more tools to help continue to improve your health, right? So I think it's a really beautiful place you're in, where you're working, you're married, you're living in Florida, and you're hearing this podcast. And this has been an amazing interview, such a hopeful, powerful interview. But I know we've been on for a while. I'd love for you and Emma to talk about the romance piece, because we've had not many. We've had a couple of people come on and share that they've had some great successes despite their chronic Lyme journey. And I just want you guys to talk about, how that happened and give our listeners some tips and tricks to have a successful romantic relationship, and also let them know that they are deserving of it. Because I think the biggest thing people share with us privately is, I don't feel like I deserve love. I feel less than because I'm sick. I am not quote unquote healthy, and therefore nobody can love me. So if you could just talk about that and then give our listeners some tips and tricks, and you guys could just kind of have a little discussion about the romance piece, because I think that's a really unspoken part of this journey, the loneliness of it when it comes to being an adult and romantically speaking.
Well, were you and your husband, like I'm picturing in my head, and I could be totally wrong, like this little support team just like bonding over their awful treatments together and becoming best friends through that? Is that how did you guys develop?
Yeah. So it was like that. We would relate with a lot of things, and like we're like, oh my gosh, really this? Or yeah, I feel like this, or oh my gosh, is it a full moon? Or oh, I'm having a flare, like random things like that. And even today we still do that. We're like, oh my gosh, I feel terrible. And he's like, yeah, I feel awful. This is so stupid. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll rub your back because your back hurts. Well, then you can massage my hands because my neuropathy hurts, like things like that. But what people don't talk about also is, because sometimes you're both in pain at the same time, or you're both struggling mentally at the same time, it can also be the opposite. It's not so like, it's not always easy. It's just because you two have the same thing. Sometimes it can be, oh, hey, we really got to make sure we communicate, we work together, because we're both experiencing bad things at the same time.
Yeah.
It can go either way, but we supported each other because he's relapsed twice since I've been with him, and both times he needed IV antibiotics for almost 2 years. And so we've been together for 7.5 years. So most of our relationship, he's been on treatments, and we've really had to be there for each other through the thick and thin. But at the end of the day, like, we really do care for each other. And I could not imagine being with somebody who didn't have a chronic illness.
Yeah. My boyfriend, we met, we're together about 4 years, a little over. We met at college together, and I met him as I was becoming very sick. So I am impressed that he stayed with me and didn't think I was crazy, because he just met me and I'm like, my hip is like out. And he's like, okay, what do you need? And he just like totally believed me. And
Yeah.
I felt like at some point he was so amazing. I would lean on him for everything, but I didn't realize at what point I became responsible for my own needs. And at several points, I was aware that I needed to recognize and check in with myself. I'm not doing well mentally, and it's not his job to fix it. It's my job to fix it. And that's something that has been huge in our relationship, because it's so hard to just tell someone how you're feeling when you don't know how you're feeling, and saying what you need. And he's always been really receptive, but sometimes it's just really hard to say what you need without wanting to. We're long distance, and it would hurt my hand to hold the phone, and I would feel awful saying I can't talk right now. But communication, I've learned, but also really finding out where you are every single day. That was huge for me, and being honest with myself about where I was. But
Yeah. Whether you're able-bodied or not able-bodied, I feel like there are some people who don't, when they don't have Lyme, and a person with Lyme, you try to date, they don't get it. There's no empathy. They're like, what is this? Or like, they'll call it Lyme's disease. Or they'll be like, oh, okay. Like, thinking that they can actually blow it off as if it doesn't exist. I've met people like it doesn't exist. It's not there. Oh, well, I don't see it. And then there are people who have a lot of empathy, and they either care too much, where it's just like they're trying to really get involved, and you need to really like do it yourself, or they're just like it's like about finding really a good balance in somebody who works with you, because you're never going to have a perfect person. But communication, I know everybody says communication, it's like a blanket statement, but you have to express what you need. And over time, I also realized, like, my husband is not a doctor, he's not a therapist, and as much as I need to lean on him, like, he can't fix all my problems, and vice versa. Like, that would be unfair. And I think that it's an easy trap to fall into, but it's hard because you're so vulnerable, and you really want like another person, like, at such an intimate relationship to understand. And dating is very hard with a chronic illness. Yeah.
I think that would be the most important thing at the end of the day, is that they understand. You understand each other, but if someone is not with a chronic illness, that they understand what you need with a chronic illness and what life must be like.
And I just want people listening to know that you're worthy. Just because you may not be where you want to be, you are further along in your journey than you were at your worst, and you are worthy of love. And I think that's the most important message here. And I mean, our listeners obviously can't see us. This is an audio only podcast, but I was smiling the entire time you guys were talking, because it really is such powerful advice. So thank you for being so personal with your stories, both of you, on that piece. And I do just want to get into what you're doing, Rebecca, today, because one of the reasons why Rich and I and Emma are huge fans of you is because I am just so in love with the art that you perform. I mean, I call it art. I mean, I hope, but I believe it's true art, what you're doing. So it's rhinestone art, right? I mean, you're creating these really beautiful pieces of art and you're sharing them with the world on social media. And talk about putting a smile on my face. Every time I come across one of your posts, I just smile because they're so beautiful. So talk to us about how you got into this world of sharing such joy and happiness through art with the community and how it's helped you in your journey.
Yeah, so in the beginning of my Lyme journey, back when I was a teenager, I always liked really pretty sparkly things, and I came across crystals one day. I'm like, oh, I want to start putting crystals on everything because, I was home and I wasn't at school and I was bored, and so I was coming up with all these different projects, and I'm like, okay, let me start doing this. So that's when it started, my love for crystals, when I had Lyme, and then as I got older, it continued, and one day I'm like, you know what? I really can't do much, but my hands, they still work. I was on disability, still struggling in that department a little bit, but I was like, I need to try something. So I started doing rhinestone art. And then along the way, I said, you know what? Really, my brand, like every month I was donating to a different Lyme organization, like a little bit what I could. Like, why don't I just start having other people tell their stories and just like fill out a form? I have a form on my website for people to fill out. I also have like a blog with like sources to all the possible Lyme information that you would ever need. I like really try to have that there. And then I started having, I think so far I've had 4 people, right? And I said, in exchange for sharing your story, like a little post, like I will make you a cup. At all, you can have it, whatever, like no charge, like I'll send it to you. And I know that it's super important to be hydrated when you have Lyme. So I was sending people little cups for sharing their stories. I mean, I got very sick after COVID. I kind of slowed down a little bit with posting. So I haven't been able to do as much, but that was something that I was doing for a while. And I have like a whole highlight bubble sharing random Lyme facts, mostly reposting, because I'm not gonna like provide like any information for myself. So I'm like reposting things from different Lyme accounts to show any of my followers, my customers, like, hey, here's some information about this you may not know.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
I'm on your Instagram right now and I'm looking at your Lyme bling, right? And it's just beautiful. And I love your tagline in your profile caption where it says blinging since 2012. I mean, that's a cool tagline you got there. And I just encourage everybody to go check you out. So what is your handle? I'm probably gonna, I don't even know what it is. I'm gonna say it incorrectly. Can you just give us your handle, your Instagram handle, so people can go check you out?
Bijou by Becca, Bijou by Becca. A lot of people say bougie by Becca. I'm like, close, but not exactly. It
Not
just
quite.
means like jeweled and elegant and delicate. That's what it means.
Rebecca, are you still looking for people to come on to be interviewed by you on your blog? Are you, should we do a call to action here for people listening to say, hey, look, if you want to share your story, reach out to Rebecca, or are you temporarily suspending that?
No, yes, please. I'm definitely going to be doing that. There may be a little delay on getting the cups out to everybody, but I would love to do that again. Like, it was such a wonderful experience with the 4 different people that I did it with. I was like, the best. I loved hearing people's stories, and so many people also that knew nothing about Lyme appreciated hearing their stories too. I'm like, you know what? I don't care if these people don't care and they're just here to see the cups. I'm like, I'm going to share it anyways.
Well,
Exactly.
I want to be your first volunteer from this podcast. So I volunteer when you are ready to be a contributor to your blog. I will write whatever you need and do whatever you need. So please hold me accountable, and I would love to participate if you're willing to be a guest blogger. And I do want to also ask, are you on any other social media? Is there any other accounts people can check you out on? Because I mean, like I said, I on Instagram, it just brings me joy seeing your account. So are you on Facebook? Are you on TikTok? Are you on any other platforms?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm on just TikTok and Instagram mainly for now.
Well, the final question of our podcast is always asked by our guest co-host. So not to put Emma on the spot, but Emma, do you have a final question for Rebecca before we conclude this brilliant podcast?
I have 2 questions.
Love it.
Can I be the second person to submit a story? And what advice would you give for someone today if they had just got bitten by a tick?
Okay. So I would say go to your primary care doctor. Make sure your primary care doctor listens. If they don't listen, try another care doctor, and make sure that during this time, like there's a lot of credible sources online, like Global Lyme Alliance. You guys also, the Tick Boot Camp, you guys have sources as well. iLads, there's a lot of sources. I would encourage people to look at all the different things, to be very aware with their body and listen to your body. And most of all, have support. I don't care if it's one friend, I don't care if it's one family member or somebody online. Find somebody to be there with you through this period of time, because if you get bit, it's not so easy as like, oh, let me just throw the tick off. Like, no, you gotta really, really watch your body, or else it can get a little out of hand.
Yeah.
Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining our Tick Boot Camp. I just want to share with you that I had a long day at work. I came home to this podcast. I've been looking forward to it, but I have life brought back to me. I have such energy and happiness because of your story. You're filled with hope and inspiration, and your positive attitude and your approach to helping this community is just beautiful. So thank you so much. Emma, thank you for co-hosting. As always, you were amazing. And I just want to say, for everybody listening, please, please, please go check out Rebecca's social media and check out her beautiful store and all of her beautiful artwork. And thank you again.
Thank you for listening to our Tick Boot Camp interview with our guest, Becca. To our listeners, we have a call to action. First, if you'd like to learn more about Rebecca, visit her Instagram at Bijou by Becca, BIJOU by BECCA. Second, if you've enjoyed this episode of the Tick Boot Camp podcast, please share it with your friends on social media. Third, Tick Boot Camp has created a tick bite blueprint that has been inspired by the information that has been shared with us by past podcast guests. We urge you to visit our website at tickbootcamp.com/bite to visit the blueprint. Fourth, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify to get your automatic episode updates of our Tick Bootcamp podcast. Please take a minute to leave us an honest review on your podcast platform of choice. And finally, if you'd like to search our podcast library of almost 350 episodes, subscribe to our email list, or share feedback, please visit our website at tickbootcamp.com. Thank you, as always, for listening.